Welcome back to the First Gnostic Church of Christ. We are now on verse number 24 of the Secret Book of John. This is video number 11. So let's pick up where we left off last when Christ was describing to John what happens to the soul after death. Christ does also introduce the concept of what's called the Despicable Spirit. So John is curious, where does this thing called the Despicable Spirit come from? So the Despicable Spirit really is that spirit within the Demiurge and his Archons that is motivated out of the intention to keep humankind enslaved in obedience and worship and reverence to the Demiurge. So verse 24 says, I said, this is John speaking, Lord, where did the Despicable Spirit come from? Unquote. Then he said to me, it all began when the Mother Father, whose mercy is great, the Spirit who is holy in every respect, the compassionate, and who troubles herself with you, that is the epinoia of the luminous pronoia. So again, epinoia, knowledge, it's the thought of creation, and the luminous pronoia is that secret intention by the powers that be to work in your favor. It's the opposite of paranoia. So it's conspiring to do good in your favor versus conspiring to do bad against you. So pronoia awakened the seed of the perfect generation. That's the perfect first human, and that actually is the first perfect generation, which means that Sophia moved within Adam and Eve to bring about Seth and its thinking and the eternal light of the human. When the chief ruler knew that they surpassed him in excellence, for their thoughts were higher than his, he wanted to restrict their planning, for he was ignorant that they had excelled him in thinking, and that he would not be able to restrict them. So in other words, the Despicable Spirit came about because of the Demiurge's fear and jealousy against these human beings that he had made out of the dust of the earth. He realized that they could rise up and become more than him. And of course, the jealousy and fear brought in him a despicable plan to subjugate humanity and keep them as lowly beings, put upon them forgetfulness. So this is how he goes about and does this. He made a plan with his authorities, that is his powers, that's the Archons. They all came together and deliberated. How can we subjugate the human race that has great power within them to even rise above the gods? And so together they committed adultery with Sophia. Now here you have to understand what this means, because if you don't understand the proper interpretation of this sentence, you're going to think again within the proto-Orthodox construct of adultery and sin. Again, remember what the word adultery means. It means to do something outside of marriage with someone else. This is the definition of adultery. Remember that Sophia was the consort of Christ, and remember that she always had done everything with the Christ. But the one thing she didn't consult with the Christ, her consort, was when she brought about desire to understand the ineffable, take within herself the encompassment of all of infinity, to have that experience of what is it like to be the monad, God of all. By carrying this out, without the consent or the joint projection of this desire that she was doing something outside of their unity of purpose. And that is what brought about doing something outside of that merging of the two, the Sophia and the Christ. So that's what it's meaning by adultery. It's essentially telling you that the Demiurge saw a crack in the work of Sophia, and they took advantage of it, essentially. They saw that as an opportunity, and they had a kind of relationship with it. And this is what they bring about as a result of that. They bring about what's called fate. And that's the beginning of suffering and the beginning of the counterfeit chains that all humans are bound into and don't realize it. This is not telling you that Sophia actually had some type of orgiastic sex festival with the Archons. Not at all. What it says is that Sophia, in a spiritual way, did set forth, bringing forth an intention without her consort. And then the Demiurge and his Archons saw that as a vulnerable place for Sophia's initial intention, and they took advantage of it. And so they essentially raped it, if you will. And so in that way, they committed adultery with Sophia. Now, that doesn't mean Sophia consented and just went along with it. It just means that together, her doing something outside of her consort brought forth the opportunity that the Demiurge and his minions took advantage of. And this is what resulted from that. And through them was begotten bitter fate. This is what we formerly spoke about, I think it was about 2 or 3 videos back, when we were discussing the pentad and then the luminaries, as well as the 12 lights, which would represent the 12 zodiac signs or the 12 constellations in the realm of the Canoma. That becomes known as fate. So all through them was begotten bitter fate, which is the last of the counterfeit chains. So it's telling you that once you're able to break free from the astrological will, the will of life here in this realm, the Kenoma, that's the last chain that you need to break away from. And how do you do that? Well, it's through Gnosis, and it's through no longer giving your power to the demiurge. So you have to give up your old belief system and the demiurge and Jehovah and the authorities of this world as your source of truth. If your source of truth is from some authority figure, whether it be a scientist, a politician, a preacher, pastor, a professor, a celebrity, all of these are machinations of the demiurge's authorities. They're counterfeit chains that bind you in a type of semi-truth. So that's why it's considered to be an artificial spirit or a despicable spirit, because its intention is ultimately despicable, and that's to keep you in bondage from the ultimate truth and put you into amnesia and forgetfulness. And it goes on and says, and it is such that it makes each one different from every one. So it creates division, basically. There's no unity in purpose. It creates all these different religions and ideas about what truth is, and makes devices by which they can have a forum for debate and discord and disagreement. So they'll never agree on what that truth is, because each one of these truths have a little bit of truth in them, but they also have lies and illusions in them. So they're not full truth. And so everybody's going to cling to that little bit of light, because that little bit of light is what's going to give them a sense that they have purpose, you see. And they could not let that go, because once they let go of that little light, that counterfeit chain, then they're going to feel like they have nothing to live for. And so that group over here does it this way, or sees this angle on the truth over here, whereas the other one sees this angle on the truth on this side. But what they're both missing out on is the full picture of the truth, which is, of course, comes through Gnosis. This is what you have, that everybody's seeing it from a different angle, and it is such that it makes each one different from every other, which ultimately leads to division, which we get the word devil ultimately. And it is painful, and it oppresses that so, since the gods and angels and demons and all the generations have intermingled with it up to the present day. And even today we have factions, this nation versus that nation, this race versus that race, this religion versus that religion, this political party versus that political party, this scientist versus that scientist, or religion against science, celebrities against politicians, so forth and so on. So the ultimate goal here is to divide and conquer, to get you to have fights among each other so that you can't see the full picture and you're missing the fireworks that are going on above your head. The beauty of life, because you're down on the ground fighting each other in the dirt. Okay, so you're preoccupied with that. It goes on and says, for from that fate appeared every iniquity and injustice and blasphemy, and the fetter of forgetfulness and ignorance, and every harsh command, and every severe sins and great fears. This is the despicable spirit that they were driven by, is to create division so that every faction would have a little bit of the truth, but mostly lies. And then they would miss out, and they would disagree with each other, because they definitely have the truth, but they're so fixated on that narrow vision of truth, they can't understand that they just have a sliver of truth. And this group over here has a sliver of truth, but they're all missing out on the fullness of truth. And so they fight each other, and they fight to death to defend that truth, you see. That's what results ultimately in all the injustices, all the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit in them, not to lead according to the truth within them, but according to a truth that they've been persuaded to believe. And they forget what ultimate truth is, and they go into ignorance. The commanders tell them, go over there and kill, drop bombs, do this, smear your opponent, do all these things in the name of justice, in the name of truth, a false truth, you see. And so they go about and do this. And it ultimately leads to humans not trusting each other, fear and tribulations and terror. And this is how the demiurge does it in his Archons. And they do this in a despicable, manipulative way. And it says, and this is how they made the whole creation blind, so that they may not know the God who is above them all. And because of the fetter of forgetfulness, their sins were hidden. So what does it mean their sins were hidden? What it means is they don't see their ignorance. They don't understand where they're missing the mark, because they can't see, because they're so obsessed and misled and blinded by the madness, the fury and madness that's going on right in front of them, and preoccupied with it, that they can't see the full picture. For they were bound with measures of times and seasons. And so on top of that, with fate comes death. And so they're in a big state of urgency and panic, because they see they're aging and time's running out, and they don't know what to do, because either they don't believe in any kind of afterlife, so they have to hurry up and get whatever they want in a short time, or they do believe in afterlife, and they believe either they're going to go to heaven or hell, so they have a short time to get it all right, exactly according to every little detail of Levitical law or the Mosaic law or whatever other law that's in black and white print, you see, called the Bible, missing out on all the other books that prevent them from seeing the full picture, you see. So this is what happens. Then that Kronos, which is the god of the planet Saturn, which we get Saturday and Satan and the worshippers of Sabaoth, which is the worshipping of the day of Saturn, or Saturn Day, which is the planet of fate, by the way, also, which is also the planet of time and seasons. And Kronos is another name for Saturn in old mythology. And Kronos is the god of time, you see. And so these all work together to bind humans into this tick-tock kind of urgency, like time is ticking away. And if that wasn't enough, then the flesh is created in such a way to have the most vital organ be like a clock. Dum dum, dum dum, dum dum, dum dum. And so time's running out, you see, all right? And the demiurge, however, ultimately regrets this because you see he has some good in him. He regrets it because, and we're going to see why he regrets it, because he realizes that this suffering that he's putting on humanity doesn't get them to do what he wants them to do, you see. All right, and he had regrets about everything which had come into being through him. Again, he planned to bring a flood over the human creation. Many different occasions he attempted to subjugate them by kicking them out of the garden, preventing them from access to knowledge of the tree of good and evil. None of those worked. And so what did he do? Okay, well, I'm going to send a flood to warn them and show them you have to follow me, you have to obey me, you see. Anyone that doesn't obey me and you seek out your own wisdom, which is called wickedness in this plane, it's not a full truth, it's only a partial artificial truth, then I'm going to cause you to be in terror and fear, and I'll figure out a way where I'm going to force you to obey me and not find your own spirit and understand your origins or have gnosis. So that's what he does. He sets forth a flood. But the greatness of the light of Pronoia taught Noah. Pronoia is again the goodness of the universe conspiring to work in favor of humanity, finding gnosis. That light that's in the universe, called Pronoia, that's conspiring to do good for man, was within Noah, so he had gnosis in him, so it was working with Noah. And Noah preached to the whole offspring, that is the children of the humans. But those who were strangers to him did not listen to him. What Noah was essentially saying is, the demiurge is going to bring a flood to wipe us all out. We need to go and find a safe place. It is not like Moses said that. They hid themselves in an ark. So here, Christ is saying to John, it wasn't the ark that saved Noah, but it was that they were hidden. And they were hidden away by one of the Aeons. And this particular Aeon that came down to assist Noah and Noah's first wife was named Lilith. And we're going to learn this later on when we read other Gnostic texts. But understand that this search for the ark is not going to be found, you see, because it never existed. This whole idea that you can put all these animals, and these were written in the Genesis book as a metaphor when Moses had written it, because he did the best he could to put down in a way stories that people could consume and be interested in hearing the genealogy of the Hebrews at the time. So the best he could come up with from the gnosis within him and the stories that Jehovah had given him were contorted at best. But Christ is saying to John, that's not how it happened. But instead what happened is that they were shrouded and hidden away, Noah and his people, and they were taken to a high mountain. Then the flood occurred. Another time that Christ and Sophia and the Pronoia within the universe, the light, intervened for humanity. But many other people from the immovable race, so this was Noah among many of the others that went with him, they entered a place. They were hidden in a luminous cloud, and he understood his authority. Because Noah understood at that time that this Jehovah God is not to be trusted. He knew that he had to follow, or he had to listen to him to some extent, because at that point he didn't realize that he had more authority than Jehovah. But it was at this moment that he realized, no, I'm actually higher up than Jehovah. When Jehovah threatened him with the flood, right? He saw the evil ways of Jehovah. And so that woke him up, and he understood his authority. That's when Noah began to become bitter, embittered, and depressed, because he realized that the God that he had been worshiping all this time was a false God. And that's when he started to get drunk and start to lose his sense of bearing. Because imagine all the people that were wiped out because of this Jehovah God, and he had followed this Jehovah God. Many of his friends and workers and perhaps even some of his family members were wiped out by this Jehovah. And so naturally, Noah is going to be depressed, you see, and this is what happened. And he created a plan with his powers. He sent his angels to the daughters of men. And so when this is where it comes about, you see. The demiurge is saying, okay, I need to figure out a way to make these human beings follow me. So it hasn't been working from the outside. I even went out and I made a son, two sons, to be pitted against each other because I want to create division because I'm the God of good and evil, and this is the way it works, that I keep them under control. But that plan didn't work, okay? So that didn't work. So maybe what I need to do is I need to get more involved. So let me get the Archons involved in this. Maybe just me doing it by myself is not enough. And so what does he do? He gets some of the angels involved. So this is what he does. He says, and he created a plan with his powers. He sent his angels to the daughters of men so that they might take some of them for themselves, and they might raise a seed to be a respite for them. In other words, he sent some of the Archons down to take human flesh. To possess some of the bodies, and they would have intercourse with some of the women. The demiurge was thinking that if I am able to get enough of my angels to do this, then I can make them into rulers over the humans. And then that way I can finally get them under control. You see, that's what he did. And at first they were not successful. But when they did not succeed, they gathered together again and made another plan. This is when they created a despicable spirit in the likeness of the spirit who had descended so that through it they might pollute the souls. So in other words, they used the mock-up of Sophia's light, and they remembered that, and they said, okay, when they saw that this light was coming down, they said, this is what obviously humans want. So they created a mock-up of that, and that's that despicable spirit. And the angels changed their own likeness into the likeness of each one's mate, filling them with the spirit of darkness, which they mixed with them and with wickedness. In other words, they knew that the humans wanted knowledge. They wanted wisdom. This is what they were hungry for. And so they created a deformed type of wisdom to give them. So they threw them some small baby books and, like kids' books and things like that, and toys and things to invent, little trinkets and jewelry and things like that to keep them busy. And in addition to that, they made the angels their mates and ultimately to be the kings and queens to rule over them, to keep them in check and keep them in order. So that's what they did. So what did they do? They brought gold and silver and gifts and copper and iron and metal and every sort of thing belonging to these classes, and they enticed them with these trinkets and shiny things, and they used those as a way to make it into a reward system. If you do this, we'll give you the shiny thing, and you can put on the makeup and look pretty, and you can do this, and we'll give you gold so you can buy things. So they set up a monetary system, essentially, and created taxes and things like this. So they knew that humans needed some form of civilization because they were beings that their source of life was knowledge, you see. Humans being source of life is not flesh. It's not vegetables. It's not animals. It's not those things. It's knowledge. Without knowledge, humans would shrivel up and die. And so the demiurge realized this, that humans were hungry to venture out and have adventures and have new experiences and learn new things. And so what did the demiurge do? He said, I got lots of shiny things that you can spend your time trying to figure out. And so that's what he does. He brings it down, gold and silver and trinkets and all these types of things, and set up like a type of civilization. And they beguiled the human beings who had followed them into great troubles by leading them astray into much error. In other words, they mistaken these things for truth, and they got sidetracked and hoodwinked into thinking this is what life is about, you see. And they grew old without having any enjoyment. So they had to labor to build these tall buildings and make these things, gold pieces, and work for each other to the point at which it was drudgery, basically. And they had no true enjoyment in their lives. And they died without having found any truth, without having known the God of truth. So they begin to believe that Jehovah was their God. And they begin to believe that these Archons who had come into the flesh bodies, possessed those flesh bodies, became their kings and queens, were by birthright, had the right to have these positions by birthright, essentially. And that's where monarchy began, you see. And thus the whole creation became enslaved forever from the foundation of the world until this very day. And that's how it started, you see, this whole concept of civilization, and the kings and queens have this rightful rulership. And even today, they're wanting to go back to that system, as you see many nations already, Putin being one of those that now is going to rule for 20 years, and then you have the Chinese a prime minister who's looking to extend his rulership, and even Trump, who has laughed about doing so as well. Whether or not he really meant it, we don't know, but he certainly kind of said it in a type of joke. So this is what we have, because ultimately they want to continue that, because they know that's the only way they can keep humans under control, is that they have monarchy. They have complete monopoly. And whether that's through the banking system or the corporations or through a government or both, it does not matter. They can use both devices. But then, of course, they're going to create parties. One that says, well, government will save us. The other one will say, no, allow the corporations to do what they want and they'll save us, you see. But the truth of the matter is, neither one of them are going to save us, you see. And so that's what ends up happening. And they took women, they begot children out of darkness according to the likeness of their spirit. Darkness here meaning out of ignorance, not knowing Gnosis. And their hearts became closed and hardened by the hardening of the despicable spirit until today. So essentially the despicable spirit is the intention of the demiurge and his archons to use these devices of control, this hierarchy he builds, this one world system. Well, people keep waiting for the one world order. I hate to break it to you, it already is here. It's been here for 6,000 years plus. All right, so that's what the despicable spirit is. It's that intention to continue that and keep humankind under that hierarchical control, the one world order, you see. That's what that is. And then verse 26 says, therefore I, the perfect pronoia of the all, this is Christ, changed into my seed, meaning that I came down eventually. For I existed from the first, and meaning Christ was from the beginning, traveling on every road. For I am the wealth of the light. I am the remembrance of the fullness. I traveled into the vastness of dark, meaning he came down to earth, and I preserved until I entered the midst of the prison. So he came to earth. That's where the prison is. He preserved in Adam and Eve through Seth, and ultimately came to earth as the physical Jesus in Galileo and Jerusalem in 2,000 years ago. And the foundations of chaos quaked. And I hid myself from them because of their evil, meaning their divisive ways. And they did not recognize me. They couldn't see because they didn't have eyes to see, essentially. That right before them was their undoing. And they were actually part of keeping humankind shrouded in darkness. And by keeping the light shrouded, they couldn't see the light. You see, again, I returned for the second time. So the first time that he's talking about here was when he was in the Garden of Eden, along with Sophia. Sophia appearing as an eagle, and he appeared as a serpent, okay? Again, I returned for the second time, and I traveled. And the second time is when he comes down to Hades and hell. And I came forth unto those who belong to the light, which is I, that's Seth, the remembrance of the pronoia. I entered the midst of the dark and the inside of Hades. So the midst of dark here is Adam, and inside of Hades is Eve. That's the womb. Seeking to put my household in order. In other words, creating a race of people called the Seth, of the Sethians, you see. Seeking to put my household in order, my genealogy. And the foundations of chaos quaked such that it seemed that they would fall down upon those who dwell in the chaos and destroy them. Here it's essentially telling you that it seems as though these forces are going to succeed, right? But the key word here is it seemed. But again, I fled up to my luminous root so that they would not be destroyed before the time was right. So every time, as you recall before, that Christ brought light and Sophia brought light, the demiurge sensed that, and his archons sensed that, and went after them. But each time that the demiurge and his archons went after that light, it eluded them, is what Christ is saying here. It eluded them. They couldn't grasp it because they didn't have gnosis to grasp it. Still for a third time, and this is when he came to earth and died on the cross. I, who am the light that exists in the light and the remembrance of the pronoia, I traveled in order to enter into the midst of the darkness in the inside of Hades. I filled my countenance with the light of the consumption of the aeon, and I entered the midst of their prison, which is the prison of the body, and that's when he came into a physical body. And I said, whoever hears arise from lethargic sleep. That's when he said, crying in the desert, first through John the Baptist, and then finally him coming thereafter, saying, whoever hears, listen to Gnosis, listen to the truth. And he wept, shedding tears, heavy tears he wept from himself. And he said, who is it who calls my name, and from where and from does this hope come to me, who am dwelling in the fetters of the prison? And I said, I am the pronoia of the pure light. So he's essentially saying that I've been with you all the time. I never left you from the very beginning. Through all your trials and tribulations, I've been there to rescue you. I am the thought of the virginal spirit, that's the monad, from the very beginning. The one who raises you to the place of honor. See, always have thought well of you. You've always been worthy. I've always received you. I never denounced you. I never said you were not worthy. I never said you were sinful and horrible and beastly. I always embraced you. I always considered you as honorable. Therefore arise and remember that you are the one who has heard, and follow your root, which is I, the compassionate. Fortify yourself against the angels of poverty, and again that's the Archons, who are poor in spirit, poor in understanding rather, and the demons of chaos. And the demons of chaos here are the actual demons, and the angels of poverty. These are both Archons. The angels are the side of trying to do good, and the demons are the side of creating chaos, you see. But these are the two sides that this God of this world uses, the God of good and evil, you see. And all of those who ensnare you, and be watchful of the lethargic sleep. Don't go back to sleep. Keep your gnosis alive. Keep it awake. When you get doubt, remember the gnosis. Go back to it. And the garment of the inside of Hades. Be watchful of the lethargic sleep, and the garment of the inside of Hades. What is the garment of the inside of Hades? The garment of the inside of Hades is the flesh realm that you're living in. You're living in hell now. This is hell. This is Hades. And the garment are all of those gold pieces and the fetterings and the shiny, sparkly things to keep you distracted. And I raised him up and sealed him with the light of the water with 5 seals. And remember, the 5 seals are the pentat: indestructibility or incorruptibility, thought, foreknowledge, truth, and eternal life. Those are the pentat. So Christ was sealed in that light of the pentat, so that death would not have power over him from this day forward. In other words, Christ is not going to be defeated. He's protected in the light of the monad, the mother father. So behold, now I will go up to the perfect aeon. So this is when Christ says, I'm going back to the Pleroma. I have completed everything for you in your ears. I have told you everything I need to tell you. I have told you, John, all things so that you might write them down and give them in secret to your fellow spirits. For this is the mystery of the immovable generation. And the Savior gave these things to him so that he might write them down and keep them secure. And he said to him, Cursed be anyone who should exchange these things for a gift, rather for food or drink or clothing or anything else of this kind, unquote. So what is Jesus saying here? What is Christ saying here? Why is he making it a point? Because he's going to see that people are going to take this truth and they're going to exchange it for a lie, things of this world. Whether it be, getting a gift of reputation, I become the head priest or the head pastor or the church father of the world, or they give me food or drink or clothing or all these kinds of things. Anything else of this kind, anything to do with this generation. Understand that that person is going to be cursed, not because Jesus is going to reach out and curse them or God the Father is going to curse them, but rather that you cannot fight truth. And when you fight truth, it will follow you. And it will be like you're carrying around a curse because you are living in a lie and you're putting your truth in things that are a lie. And that's carrying a curse. So that's what Christ is saying here. And these things were given to him in a mystery. And immediately he disappeared before him. And he, John, went to his fellow disciples. He related to them the things which the Savior had said to him. Jesus Christ, Amen, the secret revelation according to John. And that ends the secret book of John. So we've gone through already 11 videos. So you can see how much knowledge, even though it's just 27 verses, it's just astoundingly compact with all of humanity from the beginning to the end, how it all came about. And look how much truth it holds within it of the way things actually are. It's just the way it is, you see. It's like, and it's the way, not only the way things are, but the way things work. Not only the way things are, but the way things actually work. It's here. It's all here. Nothing's been left out. And it resonates and it ties into the canonical text with no problems. It's completely seamless. Like I said, this was done away with. It was kept a secret so that people wouldn't be able to take this truth and exchange it for something else. So it would be lost for all time. So now we're in an age where this is the age of Sophia we're coming into. It is the age of the knowledge of good and evil, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That is the age of Aquarian. The age prior that we're leaving now is the age of Christ. That's the age of grace, you see. These two work together, side by side, Sophia and the Christ. They're consort in the Pleroma. And they're working together to lift man back up away out of this lower realm called the Kenoma, the dark realm, the matrix. All right, there it is. And what we're going to do in the next video, we're going to read the short version of the Secret Book of John in one video, and I'm only going to stop at the major sections to reinforce the lessons we've learned. But there is a shortened version of this that I think is important to read because some of the words are slightly different than this long version, and I think it's important to highlight some of the differences so that you can have your own understanding and not be told. So I'm here to tell you my understanding of Scripture based upon what I've read and what I know, but I'm not going to force you to have to think my way. Again, I said Gnosticism is not a dogma. It's here together, jointly, all of us trying to find truth in the ways that we can. And truth of the matter is, ultimately, truth, all the fullness of truth is not going to be found by one person, but it's going to take all of us together as a unit. All right, with that, we'll talk again soon.